Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1165, Thursday, June the 18th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so yesterday's upload was quite delayed. Again, that's just seems like about once a month I get a failed video upload. And I've concluded that it's an issue with my internet service provider, Spectrum. They must do like a backup once a month or something, and when they do, you just lose your connection, and when that happens, your video fails. And anyway, that's what happened, but sorry for the late upload, because I know a lot of people tell me that they like to have their morning coffee with my video, and so I can imagine if you're used to that as part of your routine and you wake up and my video's not there, you're probably upset. Your day doesn't start the way you would like. I get that. I really do. I'm the same way. I mean, I have a certain routine in the morning, and I don't want anything messing with my routine for the first half hour of my day. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to see anything. I want to drink my damn coffee, read the news headlines. I don't want to be getting texted or phone calls, or all that stuff ruins my day. So I know exactly how it feels. It happens to me, unfortunately, quite often. But anyway, failed upload. So what can we do? Just re-upload it and hope for the best. So anyway, it looks like yesterday the Department of Justice, essentially Attorney General Barr, has filed a breach of contract lawsuit against the Walrus. Cuckoo-ca-choo, cuckoo-ca-choo, cuckoo-ca-choo. Yeah, that's right. Cuckoo-ca-choo, cuckoo-ca-choo. The Walrus. John Bolton. So they filed a breach of contract lawsuit against the Walrus, John Bolton, on the grounds that his new book contains classified information. The book is set to be released on June the 23rd. The Department of Justice has sought a temporary restraining order to stop the release of the book, and that's good news. As most of you know, and I know a lot of you feel the same way, I thought Bolton was one of the worst picks that Trump made. Now, a lot of people argued at the time, yeah, but he wants to have this hawk guy on his staff just because he wants to hear the other side, because he likes hearing all sides, and because it sends a message to North Korea, Iran, and people like that hey, I got this hawk, so you don't want to push me around. So, I mean, I kind of understood all that, but this, I just don't think you can let people that close to you, who hate you, and who are playing for the other team. And I always felt like Bolton was a leaker. I always felt like Bolton was a leaker, meaning a talker, that he's in there having these super private conversations with Trump and his national security team, and you just know that Bolton runs around with a bunch of anti-Trumpers, and you just know that he's talking to these people. And so I was never happy, just like H.R. McMaster, who Bolton replaced. I also thought he was a deep stater, and I'm sure he was a deep stater and probably a leaker. I think a lot of these leaks that we saw and a lot of the problems that were happening around Trump in his first 2 years or so had a lot to do with people very close to him, around him, that he appointed. Because I think Trump, in a lot of ways, believed that once he won the election, that the hatchet was buried, and now he was going to bring all these people together, including former Bush Republicans, neocons, and they were all just going to say, okay, well, Trump won. We're going to have rational conversations here. We're going to do our best to serve the president. But that's not how the game works in Washington, man. It's not. These people, like Bolton, see themselves as part of the permanent deep state, and that Trump is just a temporary visitor, and that once he's gone, they'll go back to business as usual. But while he's there, they want to try to force him as much as possible to follow the status quo. So I never trusted John Bolton. I always felt that he was a leaker and a talker and stabbing Trump in the back, just like H.R. McMaster. And now, of course, this is all proving true. And I do hope that while Mr. Jensen is investigating, I think actually it's the other guy, John Bash, this U.S. attorney from Texas, is supposedly the one that Barr has got looking into the leaks. And I do hope that they'll be paying some close attention when they're looking for those leaks to Bolton, the Walrus, along with H.R. McMaster. I believe both of those guys were leaking, whether or not they were leaking classified information, or just a lot of this personal stuff about Trump, his personality, behind closed doors when he's in discussions, or the fact that he gets mad, has a temper, whatever. All that type of stuff that was coming out for, 2 years or more, all that type of stuff is stuff you would only know if you were actually around the president. It had to be people very close to him. And I always suspected, first I suspected McMaster, then he goes, and unfortunately Trump brings in Bolton. But I think that Trump has learned his lesson about these types of people, that you cannot bring in these deep staters and think that they have the best interest of the country. That's what they're there to do, to help move things forward or anything. No, I think he's finding out that DC is a very, very political town, and it's it's not a town that's interested in any of the types of things that Trump's interested in, which is moving the country forward. These people are interested in maintaining their agenda, not moving the country forward. So I think Trump's starting to find out that the swamp is really as deep as it seems, and that the monsters there are even uglier than he ever imagined. They're not your friends. They're not your friends. You're never going to bring these anti-Trump type people around you and think that they're going to be patriotic servants or whatever, and are going to pursue the best interest of the country. That's not how they think. They have other interests that they're pursuing, and it's not Trump's agenda. I can assure you of that. So I do think he's learned his lesson, but he paid a heavy price with people like McMaster and Bolton. And I do hope that this U.S. Attorney, John Bash, as he's looking for who the leakers would have been, I do hope that he looks into McMaster and Bolton, the walrus. Looking to cash in. That's what he's trying to do. Cash in. Write a tell-all book and cash in. What a disturbed, disgusting individual. Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci. Finally admitting that he lied. Finally admitting that he lied. He told 60 Minutes on March the 8th that people should not be wearing masks. And he went into the reasons for why. But he never told the real reason why, the truth. Now he's telling the truth. Now he says that, well, people should be wearing masks. And he says that the reason that he was recommending people not wear masks back months ago was because masks were in short supply. And he didn't want average people wearing the mask because he wanted them for medical personnel or whatever. So there's a lot more to it than that. That's kind of it, but there's a lot more to it than that. You notice Trump doesn't talk much about Fauci anymore. I don't think he talks to Fauci anymore. I think he's figured out Fauci. I think we all figured out Fauci a long time ago when we saw those photographs of the people he runs around with. The total globalist elite. That's who he runs around with. No doubt in my mind that he was working to damage Trump. I never trusted the guy from day one. He looks like a slimy weasel. And now we know he was a slimy weasel. Still is a slimy weasel. So there you go. Fauci and Birx. Thanks for nothing. Other than trying to destroy the economy, which Trump is now going to bring back. But still, a lot of people took a big hit, put the country through a lot of bullshit that we didn't have to go through, all because of Fauci. This guy's a scumbag. I would fire him. Of course, it's nearly impossible to fire a federal employee, now that we know that. Well, yesterday we talked about the fact that it was Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Snap, Crackle, and Pop, they're the ones who got deep-sixed yesterday because of white cartoon characters on a cereal box is very offensive, painful, hurtful. But now it looks like they've gone after Aunt Jemima. 131 years. And Uncle Ben's rice. Can't have Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima on the label. Can't have that. It's very hurtful. It's very painful. Brings up a lot of bad emotions and memories. And just shows the institutional racism in syrup and rice. That's right. You probably never knew how much institutional racism existed in that pancake syrup that you're using. Feeling the white guilt? Feeling the white guilt as you pour that syrup over top of your freshly buttered pancakes? Me neither. So, where does all this end? Well, the truth is, it doesn't. Unless we put an end to it. Until we reach the point where rational people say, that's it. I've had it. Enough is enough. Now, as I pointed out, I think many people are already there. But you have to be very careful these days as to how you express your dissent against the woke left and the cancel culture. But it's as I say, I think that in this upcoming election, you are going to see a lot of people who are simmering with anger. And that is when they're going to speak up at the ballot box. And if that doesn't work, I guess we'll try something else. But there's no question that people are pretty much fed up with this. I mean, banning syrup and breakfast cereals, or banning cartoon characters, Elmer Fudd. I mean, my God, this is ridiculous. And I think a lot of people just had enough. And the media tries to present a picture that's a false reality, as if the whole country is on board with this craziness, when in fact they're not. They're not. But they want to present that picture to make people think, wow, everyone else in the country is really paying attention to this, and we really need to focus on this stuff. And I guess there must be something wrong with me, because I'm not really feeling all this, but maybe I should be. What's wrong with me? Maybe I need to get on board. No, that's not what's going on. Nope. Most people who have a lick of sense in their head know exactly what's going on. And a lot of people have a lot to lose. And speaking up right now could cost you your job. And it's making a lot of people very nervous. And it's a horrible place to be in this country, where you no longer have a First Amendment right. You don't have First Amendment rights. If free speech is protected, that means it's protected. That means no one can do anything to you for simply what you say. And we're not, I understand if you work for some company and you go out on social media and you say a bunch of really horrible, crazy things. But we're talking about someone who might post up on their Twitter feed, hey, I love Rice Krispies, and it's just silly to think that we need to ban these 3 little cartoon characters. That's just silly. Yeah? What could get you fired for saying that? If you own a business, you could end up with your business being overrun by thugs for saying that. It's crazy. And most people know it's crazy. And I think they know where the craziness is coming from. And it ain't from the libertarians. That's for sure. It's not from even the clueless, spineless Republicans. No, it's coming from the left. And most people who have a lick of sense in their head know that. Well, here is a really, really good move by Jim Jordan and some Republicans, 8 Republicans to be specific, who are subcommittee chairmen in the House. They have written a Dear Colleague letter to inform members that they will not support the FISA reauthorization until John Durham's investigation is complete. This is a beautiful, beautiful move by Jim Jordan and these Republicans. So if you remember, about 2 months ago, when this FISA reauthorization came up, they actually got it through the Senate. They got enough votes in the Senate, but then it had to go over to the House. Once it made it to the House, all these Republicans like Jordan and Gates and all these guys, Gohmert, these guys have said, no, we're not going to reauthorize the FISA court until we know exactly what the hell's going on with FISA. Now, it wasn't even a full reauthorization of the whole FISA law or whatever. That's written in stone. It had to do just with just a couple pieces of FISA. And you had certain neocons out there like Lindsey Graham and others saying, hey, we have to have this. But the House Republicans weren't buying. And, of course, there were many Democrats who also weren't buying, who also are not big fans of the FISA court. And so the bill went through quite a few changes in the House. It was going through a lot of changes. At some point, they realized two things. Number one, that because of the various changes that they were making in the House, it would never pass muster in the Senate. That once it got back to the Senate, that it would likely not get the votes because it had been gutted so much from the original bill. But also because it wasn't politically expedient for the Democrats. So Pelosi pulled the bill because, number one, she didn't want to go into an election year with some of her, either way, it's a loser for the Democrats. If they don't sign on to the FISA, then their opponents hit them on national security. If they do sign on to it, then anti-establishment Democrats, primarying establishment Democrats, are going to use it against the establishment Democrat for voting for it. So it was politically a loser for the Democrats, and it was probably never going to make it. Once it went back over the Senate, it probably wasn't going to pass anyway. And even if it did, Trump had indicated that he would not that he would veto that. He would not sign the FISA reauthorization. He's not signing that anything giving the FISA court or the deep state any more power until he gets to the bottom of what happened in 2016, and until these people are held accountable, meaning going to jail. And that's what essentially Jim Jordan and his colleagues are saying here. Hey, until we see some people locked up, if you can just do this and get away with it, no, we're not gonna sign on to that. We want to see people in jail who lied to the FISA court, and that's some heavy players. Comey 3 times, McCabe, Rodenstein, what's his name, Dana Buente, and several others, not to mention all the DOJ and FBI lawyers who were supposed to verify and check things, not to mention the idiot who put together the Woods file, not to mention just a cast of players there, CIA, who were CIA people who were blocked when they tried to raise questions. So, no, there's a lot of bad players here. And until they get indicted, charged with the crimes, and held accountable for the crimes, the Republicans in the House, at least, are not going to sign on to reauthorizing the FISA. So, it's an excellent move, but the fact of the matter is, no justice, no FISA. No justice, no FISA. That's the new mantra that we should be talking about. And I think that puts a little bit of pressure on Attorney General Barr, quite honestly, because it was Attorney General Barr who was making the argument why we need to have this FISA reauthorization. And he was pushing really hard for it, right along with Lindsey Graham and quite a few others in the Senate, Republicans. But obviously, it didn't pass muster, and Attorney General Barr is starting to realize that there are some Republicans and the president himself who are dead serious about this issue, and that if we don't see people held accountable, that means going to jail. Going to jail. We hear that term all the time. Held accountable. What does that mean? To me, that means going to jail. When you break the law, you go to jail. Whether you're Jim Comey or you or me or anyone else. If it were you or me, we'd already have been in jail. If it were Roger Stone, he would be probably brought before a firing squad. But Comey and Brennan and McCabe and all the bunch, they're out there running around, running their mouths, doing their thing, never have been held accountable. And basically what Jordan and many of us are saying is, no, this is not going to work. These guys need to be charged with crimes. And, if Durham and Barr drop the ball here, what I would do if I was Trump is fire Barr. And I would appoint another attorney general, maybe Giuliani or somebody. And I would appoint a special counsel myself or a presidential commission with full prosecutorial powers and I would be the one to name them myself, meaning Trump. And I would make sure I got people like Joe DeGeneva and people like that. I would get some real serious people who will really investigate the crimes. Now, I don't think it's going to come to that, because I think Barr and Durham both understand that you cannot let these guys get away with this stuff. That while they may think that there could be political blowback for charging these former Obama administration officials, you could also be looking at serious blowback if you let these guys off the hook. Now, they know that the left-wingers will burn and riot and destroy. They know that conservatives won't. But they'll probably form some fairly large protests. Yes, I mean, I think this is a very good sign. I think this is exactly the way to go. And it's just a way of sending Barr the message. Now, you know, the last interview that Barr did with Fox News, he essentially said, yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking for where people committed crimes, and we plan on charging people with those crimes. And he said, just because no one's been charged yet doesn't mean that they're going to get away with it. So he's saying some things that sound good. But I'm a type of person where I'm always skeptical. I question everything until I actually see it happen. Until I actually see it happen. Now, I believe, honestly, in my gut, that there are going to be people charged with crimes, some fairly high-level people charged with crimes. But again, until I actually see it, I remain a skeptic. Well, you know, we're paying a lot of attention right now to what's going on here in the United States with all the riots and all the crazy stuff going on. The counterculture war right in the middle of a political election season makes it even worse. The fake news, all the things that we're seeing, the double standards on coronavirus versus Trump protests or Trump rallies or whatever. It's a crazy, crazy time right now. But it's not just crazy here. I mean, I don't know if you've been watching any of the videos from the UK or what's going on in France or what's going on in Brazil or what's going on in South Korea, but this has erupted all over the world, which is why I believe it's not just an organic thing. It's why I believe it's a very, very organized type of thing, and there are major players involved here behind this. Not the rank and file monkeys who are out in the streets doing their deal. They don't know. They're ignorant. They don't know that they're being played or used. There are major high-level evil forces in the world who are behind this stuff that we're watching. And just the rank and file people you see on the streets, they're just the useful morons, the useful idiots that are being used and don't even realize it. But yes, when you look at what's going on around the world, this is a global thing that's going on. And you know, you look at it going on in England, you know, and they're writing over George Floyd in England, all right? They're toppling statues in England as well. They're toppling statues everywhere. So now we have some crazy person over in Sweden, and it's not hard to find a crazy person in Sweden, by the way, pretty far left. This is a former mayor of a city in Sweden. It's a Swedish politician who now wants to remove a statue of Sweden's most famous king, who was Charles XII, otherwise known as Carolus Rex, or Carolus Rex. This guy wants to replace the statue, tear down the statue of Charles XII, who, by the way, was believed to have been a very good king, did a lot of good things for his country. And so, and keep in mind, there was a lot of bad kings around in the days. He was known as a benevolent sort of dictator. But anyway, this crazy mayor in Sweden wants to tear down the statue of this very popular king, Charles XII, and replace it with a statue of Greta Thunberg. Greta Thunberg. You know, normally they wait till you die before they build a statue. You know, I don't know if he's aware of that, but you usually don't get a statue until long after you're dead. He wants to tear down the statue of Charles XII, one of the great kings of Sweden, and replace it with a statue of Greta Thunberg. I mean, this, my friends, this should be comedy. This should be comedy. But these art people are serious, okay? Now, I don't know how many of you heard this interview with this social justice warrior, this British social justice warrior on BBC the other day, but this was even crazier. So she's being interviewed, and she's talking about why they want to get rid of the statue of Winston Churchill. And as the person's interviewing her about Winston Churchill, and she's asking this nutcase social justice warrior about Churchill, it's clear in this interview that this social justice warrior in the UK doesn't even know who Churchill is. She thinks he's still alive. She's like, well, you know, I don't know him, but I have talked to some other people who do, and they say he did some very bad things. And then the interview continues, and as the interview continues, this woman keeps referring to Churchill as if it's in the current time, as if he's still alive. I mean, she thinks he's actually a person who's alive today. And this is in England. I mean, if you live in England and you do not know who Winston Churchill is, if you live in England and you do not know who Winston Churchill is, your opinion should never be heard anywhere, especially on BBC. How do you get on the air, on the BBC, in the UK, talking about Churchill when you don't even know if the man is dead or alive? You don't know who he is. You don't know what he did or did not do. Nothing. Just, I know, let's bring this social justice warrior on to tell us why we should topple the statue of Winston Churchill. Forget the fact that she doesn't know who he is, doesn't know any of the history of Winston Churchill, doesn't know the history of the country, I would imagine. I bet you if you gave this social justice warrior a history of her own country, a history test of her own country, like 5th grade level test, I bet she couldn't pass it. And it's a problem we have here in the U.S. as well. A lot of these young people who want to topple all these statues, I mean, Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, clearly they have never been told anything about the history of our country or the history of these men other than the fact that they were white and they owned slaves. That's it. That is the history lesson that they give to young kids growing up in America today. Our founding fathers, yeah, they were a bunch of white guys who owned slaves. That is the history lesson that they get today. Not the history we got when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we were taught that Washington and Jefferson were these great men, men of the Enlightenment, the founders, the ones who created this incredible system which was to be a system of self-government. And they knew it was an experiment, and they knew it was risky, and they knew it could fail, and they knew all the problems with it, but it was the best they could come up with, and they did a pretty damn good job. And if we just had a good, honest educational system in this country, and people really understood, you know, the way the world works, the way the world has always worked, we wouldn't be having this. But it's a combination of ignorance and just rank stupidity. And I think the blame falls at the feet of the media, of corrupt left-wing politicians, and especially our failed educational system, which is now nothing more than a left-wing social program to indoctrinate kids into socialist and liberal and communist ideology. That's what our educational system has become, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing on the streets. And if you talk to some of these young people, which I occasionally do, because I work around some of them, I mean, they are literally clueless. I mean, they're mind-numbed zombies. They regurgitate what they hear from left-wing social media, you know, provocateurs, and then they repeat it over and over, and they believe it. And if you try to ask them questions that would require some history, some thoughts, some things like that, they tune you out. They don't. It's irrelevant as far as they're concerned. So that is a big problem, and the only way to reverse it is to get a handle and have some major reforms on our educational systems, our judicial systems, and we need to start exposing the left. We have a few people on the right, I mean politicians, who have the backbone to do it, but not enough. Not enough. I'm doing my part, and I know all of you are as well. So we just have to stay in the fight. But honestly, I don't know. I don't know how it ends. I know I won't be around to talk about it when we get to that point. But I did a video about, I forget how many years ago it was, maybe 6-7 years ago. I did a video where I actually said that in 30 to 40 years the U.S. would likely break up, that we would have another type of civil war, because I think that eventually there will be irreconcilable differences. History has shown it's pretty hard to keep a large country together without it breaking apart, especially when you introduce all of the types of things into the system which we know are cancers, which will eventually kill the system. And that's what we're doing. I'm just looking at what's going on today and what has been going on, and trying to project what it'll look like 30, 40 years down the road. I won't be here to have to talk about it, and neither will some of you. But some of you will be around, and I don't think you're going to like what you are going to experience if something doesn't change in a big hurry. So this Atlanta District Attorney has charged this officer Garrett Rolfe with 11 counts, including felony murder, after the shooting of Rashard Brooks. He was shot 2 times in the back after he wrestled with 2 cops. He stole one of the cops' tasers, took off running. Shortly after the DA laid the charges out, Atlanta cops began stopping the response to the responses to calls. They went back to the police station, turned in their keys, and headed home. Exactly what I talked about 2 days ago. You are going to see a mass demonstration from the police. It's coming. It's absolutely coming. They're probably working on it right now on a national scale. You see this sometimes on a local scale when there's a union negotiation and the cops will call in with the blue flu. Just imagine a national blue flu, or at least in all these blue states or blue cities, liberal states, liberal cities. Imagine all the cops in Seattle or Portland or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Chicago. Imagine every cop in the city calling in sick for 2 or 3 days, just so that they can show people exactly what happens when they're not on the job. And this is coming. And there you see in Atlanta the response by the cops to this other cop being charged with 11 counts, including felony murder. The response, a lot of the many cops in the Atlanta police force go back to the station, turn in their keys, and head home. They're done. And Atlanta's got a crime problem, by the way. Best comment of the day yesterday, Paul Sperry. There is no systemic racism, only systemic brainwashing. Man, someone ought to put that in gold-plated lettering. That is absolutely dead on. There is no systemic racism, only systemic brainwashing. Paul Sperry, once again, in very few words, says a hell of a lot. Very smart guy. That's why I follow him. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. You guys have a good night. Bye.